Hello, welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Raja Saroj Sahib and these are the headlines. The Taliban commanders claim to have seized the PANJSHIR Valley, which is the final holdout against group's control. But the resistance fighter refuted the claim, saying they are still battling. Meanwhile, China says the countries responsible for the current situation in Afghanistan should be held accountable. Pakistan's Army Chief General Bajwa says the military is fully committed to the Kashmir cause. He made these remarks in a meeting with Azad Jammu and Kashmir's Prime Minister Sardar Abdul Qayyum Niazi. Military's media wing said the two discussed India's continued unilateralism in the valley and situation along the line of control. Israeli forces have injured at least 70 Palestinians in a clampdown on an anti-settlement protest in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian media said Israeli troops fired live gunfire, rubber bullets, stun grenades and tear gas at the protesters in the Beta village. Palestinians have been holding daily protests against the construction of an illegal settlement outpost on Mount Sabeh for nearly 4 months. The US has sanctioned 4 Iranian intelligence operators for being allegedly behind a failed plot to kidnap an American journalist. The Treasury Department alleged that the individuals were working as a part of a wide-ranging campaign to silence critics of the Iranian government. Meanwhile, Iran has dismissed the new curve, saying the move reflects Washington's addiction to sanctions. Brazil has reported more than 700 new COVID-19 deaths and over 25,000 cases overnight. Mexico also lodged over 700 deaths and more than 17,000 cases since yesterday. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 79 people lost their lives to the virus and nearly 4,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has reached over 4.55 million, while the case load is more than 219 million. That's all with the headlines. We'll be right back with the details in just a bit. Welcome back. The Taliban commanders claim to have seized the PANJSHIR Valley, which is the final holdout against group's control. But the resistance fighter refuted the claim, saying that they are still battling.
Hundreds of Afghan families flee fighting between Taliban fighters and resistant forces for the control of final holdout province PANJSHIR. Earlier, the Taliban leaders said they attacked the valley after attempts for a negotiated settlement failed. In Kabul, at least 17 people were killed and another 41 were injured by the Taliban's aerial fire. Meanwhile, in the capital, women's protest for inclusion in the government turned violent after they said the Taliban fired tear gas at them. The protesters said Taliban did not allow them to march toward the presidential palace. While in Qatar, the Taliban representatives met Pakistan's ambassador and deliberated upon the bilateral relations. In a tweet, Sohail Shaheen said issues related to facilitating people's movement at Torham and Twin Baltic border crossings were also discussed. US says it will assist UN humanitarian work in Afghanistan, but it will not directly fund a Taliban government. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will convene a high-level conference on aid for Afghanistan on September 13.
Pakistan's Army Chief General Bajwa has reiterated the country's commitment to an all-inclusive Afghan government. He made these remarks during a meeting with British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. The military's media wing says Raab appreciated Pakistan's role in the Afghan situation and regional stability. The ISPR said Pakistan's effective measures in fighting COVID-19 also came under discussion. Earlier, Raab said Britain must deal with new realities in Afghanistan as it seeks to secure a safe passage for evacuations. Raab added that a team of 15 people has been deployed to help with logistics in Pakistan. He said Islamabad is a key partner to the UK, both for safe evacuations and wider strategy in the region. Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa says the military is fully committed to the Kashmir cause. He made these remarks in a meeting with Azad Jammu and Kashmir's Prime Minister Sardar Abdul Qayyum Niazi. Military's media wing said the two discussed India's continued unilateralism in the valley and situation along the line of control. ISPR said General Bajwa paid tribute to Sayyid Ali Gilani for his historical struggle for Kashmir's rights. The Army Chief also congratulated Prime Minister Niazi on the assumption of his new appointment. For his part, Niazi appreciated the Army's contribution towards security and development in the territory. Israeli forces have injured at least 70 Palestinians in a clampdown on the anti-settlement protests in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian media said the troops opened live and rubber bullets, stun grenades and tear gas at the protesters in the Beta village. Palestinians have been holding daily protests against the construction of an illegal settlement outpost on Mount Sabe for nearly 4 months. In Kafur Kadum as well, Palestinians were assaulted by the occupation forces during the weekly anti-settlement procession. Palestinian media said a young man was shot with a rubber-coated steel bullet in the head, while several others were injured. Protesters say they will not be intimidated by the Israeli violence and will continue resisting against the occupation. Now we have with us Noor Swirki, a social activist from Gaza. Swirki, thank you for joining us. Israeli forces have again injured at least 70 Palestinians in a clampdown on an anti-settlement protest in the occupied West Bank, while it continues to attack Gaza Strip, violating May's ceasefire. But the international community is silent on this Israeli aggression. What is your take?
Well, according to what is happening on the land and the reaction of the international community about the Israeli practice against the Palestinian people, and particularly here in Gaza Strip where I'm living, there is too many human rights violations against the Palestinian. And as you can see, and as it was showed in the program, we are facing like a massive or grave violation of the our rights. Like our rights of life, the dignity, and the access for any dignified life. And the last week, we lost our beloved. We have injured people because they are just acting against this undignified life in the Gaza Strip, and they are calling for lifting the siege on the sieged strip. So what they are doing is just asking for their rights, and this is the reaction of the Israeli side. And unfortunately, the international community doesn't support as it's needed for the Palestinian rights, and doesn't bring those aggressor and perpetrators, the Israelis, to the accountability and to be and call the justice for the Palestinian people.
All right, now forced evictions of Palestinians and home demolitions are being carried out by the Israeli authorities. What strategy does the Palestinian authorities could adopt to avoid these evictions and demolitions?
Yeah, so as you can, at the reality on the West Bank, okay, mainly, Israeli government or the occupation can demolish any building that they they reclaim that it's an illegal building. They don't have the permission to build these buildings, and mainly in the Jerusalem and some parts of the West Bank, they can use their fake court or to have this illegal permission to demolish those buildings for the Palestinian people. At some point, they are asking those people to demolish their building by their hands, and this is clearly injustice for them, and doesn't respect their rights of having this safe places to live, and their right to move and to from place to another, and to have their families in the safe place. In the same page, we have the Israeli side reaction on the people here in Gaza. They can bomb any building here when they just can say that it's used for the military purpose maybe, or it have some like some unaccepted use for them, despite that it's full of civilians, and sometimes without warning, they can just bomb it in airstrike. And we have, beside the demolition of and the bombing, we have sometimes innocent people who lost their lives and just killed because they don't have the time to leave these buildings, and some injuries at the same time. So in the both sides or in all the occupied Palestinian land, we are facing that act. I believe it's an illegal act from an occupation power.
Now, how do the Palestinians survive with strict blockade of the Gaza Strip?
They are trying to survive with the minimum level of the that they have, the materials and the minimum level of their rights and for their needs. So when it comes to Gaza, it's besieged, and there is a blockade here since 15 years. And people are trying to survive with the minimum things that they get from the borders and from what is Israel is allowing to enter Gaza Strip, like the goods, the medical materials, some like the power, when it's not accepted to have rebuilding for the power company here after it was destroyed in 2006. It's less than a minimum that anyone could survive in the other world. So they are trying their best. The same situation in the West Bank and the occupied land. They have that movement restriction. We have there that anybody could be arrested at any time. Some restriction also for some goods and some rights. So it's not easy to live in such a situation for the Palestinian people. They are making their best to survive in under undignified and illegal situation and condition, not respecting the human rights law and the humanitarian law, which is could be obligated in such situation for the Palestinian occupied land.
All right, Nusregi, thank you for talking to Indus News. Moving on, the U.S. has sanctioned 4 Iranian intelligence operatives for being allegedly behind a failed plot to kidnap an American journalist. The Treasury Department said targeting dissidents and journalists undermines international peace and security. The U.S. has sanctioned 4 Iranian operatives for being allegedly behind a failed plot to kidnap an American journalist. The Treasury Department said targeting dissidents and journalists undermines international peace and security. It alleged that the individuals are working as a part of a wide-ranging campaign to silence critics of the Iranian government. A Treasury official said targeting dissidents abroad shows that Iran's repression extends far beyond its borders. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the U.S. is aware of ongoing Iranian interests in targeting other American citizens. The sanctions block all property of the listed individuals in the U.S. Meanwhile, Iran has dismissed the new curve, saying the move reflects Washington's addiction to sanctions. In a tweet, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Sayed Khatibzadeh said the U.S. must respect Iran. U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered the declassification of secret documents for the government's probe into the 9/11 attacks. His instructions came in response to pressure from survivors and families of the victims of the attack. The president, through an executive order, directed the relevant agencies to publicly declassify the documents over the next 6 months. Earlier, about 1,700 people directly affected by the September 11 attacks wrote a sternly worded letter to Biden. They called on him to skip next week's memorial events unless he released the secret documents. The move comes ahead of the 20th anniversary of the attack, which spurred then-President George Bush to invade Afghanistan. Thai Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha has survived a vote of no confidence in Parliament. 5 other cabinet ministers also survived the censure motion in a similar fashion. The opposition needed 242 votes to oust out the Prime Minister, but only 208 went against the Premier, while 264 voted in favor. Prayut said he remained confident after winning the vote. This is the third such motion the government has survived and comes as pro-democracy activists plan more demonstrations. Lawmakers had accused Prayut's government of mishandling the pandemic and its severe economic impact. Brazil has reported more than 700 COVID-19 deaths and more than 25,000 cases overnight. In Mexico, 725 lost their lives and over 17,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 4.55 million, while the caseload is over 219 million. More in this report.
The prospects of the world's reopening have further diminished as countries adopt stringent measures after recent surges in the COVID-19 cases. New Zealand reported the first deaths from the Delta variant and 20 further daily infections, all in its epicenter, Auckland. Australia's most populous state of New South Wales also reported record daily locally acquired infections. Meanwhile, Britain has announced to ship vaccines to the delegates who will be attending global climate talks next month. However, in London, anti-vaccine protesters clashed with the police as they tried to storm the office of the Britain's drug regulator's office. UK's vaccine advisors say they are not recommending the vaccination of 12 to 15 years old. They say they prefer a precautionary approach in healthy children due to uncertainty over the longer-term impact of the rare side effects.
But there are uncertainties about the long-term implications of that condition. And that makes the risk-benefit balance for these children really quite tight and much tighter than we would be comfortable to make the recommendation. So that's why we're going the way we are for now. And obviously, time will tell whether these problems are going to be significant or not.
In South America, amid concerns about looming education crisis, Cuba has launched a national campaign to vaccinate children aged 2 to 12, a condition for resuming in-person studies. Peru has also launched a mass immunization rollout for teachers in the urban areas, as it aims to get schools reopened in the coming months.
We want to be with our students, but we have to make the parents and our children understand that the vaccines come first. Today, we started vaccinating teachers in the urban area. More than 60% of the teachers working in rural areas are already vaccinated. Vaccinations are guaranteed, and we hope that in a short time, teachers will be vaccinated. We are making every effort to achieve this.
Meanwhile, US pediatric COVID-19 hospitalizations have also surged due to the Delta variant. But studies suggest that fears of variants causing more severe disease are unfounded. Earlier, US top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said it is likely that 3 doses of the vaccine are needed for full protection. Moderna also said it has asked the EU's drug regulator authority for conditional approval of its booster shot.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 79 more people lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the fatality toll has jumped to 26,114. It said nearly 4,000 people contracted the virus overnight. The positivity rate of infection stood at 6.21%. The country's caseload has exceeded 1.17 million. The health authorities said Pakistan has administered 60.5 million vaccine doses so far. Meanwhile, the Civil Aviation Authority says air travel without vaccine certificate will not be allowed from October 1st. It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In another story, Afghan refugees in Pakistan are eager to go back home as the foreign forces finally end their presence in their country. This report has more.
Since 1979, Afghanistan has been in a state of war with the invasion of Soviet forces and years later the US. The conflict drew millions to cross the border into Pakistan and take refuge. Zahir Pashtun also came to Saranan camp when he was a little boy and now manages the affairs of the camp. But now, with the foreign occupation finally ending, many Afghans hope to return home after 40 years. Pashtun shows documents of his family's property and hopes the Taliban will give it back to him.
For us, Afghanistan is like our mother. We have hundreds of acres of land, but the people of the Northern Alliance have illegally seized our land. When the US came and spoke about democracy, it was nothing but lies. We just want the Taliban to help us get our land back, and I know they will fulfill their promises because they are honest Muslims.
With UN's assistance, nearly 4 million Afghan refugees have been repatriated back to Afghanistan since 2002. But those who stayed back have their reasons. Muhammad Agha Ishaqzai says he lost everything during the war between the Mujahideen and Soviet forces.
When the Taliban defeated the Mujahideen, we were happy and thought we could finally go back home. But then America invaded Afghanistan and our hope was lost. But finally, after 20 years, my country is free from foreign occupation. The Taliban have promised to help us, and I think the time has come for us to go back.
Recently, the United Nations thanked Pakistan and 7 other countries for their support to the ongoing UN operations in Afghanistan. It has warned that the war-torn country is facing a food insecurity and malnutrition crisis.
The Arab coalition says it has destroyed an explosive laden drone launched by Houthis towards southern Saudi Arabia. In a statement, the coalition said Yemeni rebels attempted to target Saudi city of PANJSHIR. The coalition said it is taking operational measures to foil attacks on civilian areas in the kingdom. Earlier, Saudi Arabia's envoy to UN, Abdullah al-Musalimi, vowed that Riyadh will take all necessary measures for its defense. He called on the UN Security Council to condemn these attacks and put an end to threats to international peace and security. Amnesty International has warned that South Sudan is witnessing a new wave of repression. Amnesty's officials said South Sudanese authorities are targeting the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. The officials said Juba arrested civil society activist and a politician, closed down a radio station and an academic think tank. This clampdown followed by a declaration last month by the People's Coalition for Civil Action calling for a peaceful public uprising. The coalition had urged the public to join protests in Juba, but the capital fell silent as authorities branded the demonstrations illegal. They said any event calling for leadership change will not be peaceful. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has vowed to frighten counter-terrorism laws this month. Her statement comes a day after an ISIS-inspired militant stabbed 7 people in a supermarket in Auckland. Ardern said attacker was charged with possession of objectionable material and weapons in 2018. She said culprit was being monitored constantly after his release but could not be kept in prison by law any longer. Ardern said 3 of the 7 wounded people are in critical condition. Earlier supermarket group Countdown, where the incident took place, said it has removed knives and scissors from its shelves. In China, 15 people have died after a heavy hauler collided with a truck in Heilongjiang province's Cuitaha city. Local authorities said at least 1 person was also injured in the accident. According to the local media, the Ministry of Public Security has initiated an investigation into the accident. It said efforts to deal with the aftermath of the incident are ongoing. Chile has reasserted its claim to undersea territory of its southern coast in a dispute with Argentina. The country has officially laid claim to 5,000 square kilometers of continental shelf in the Drake Sea. Chile's President Sebastián Piñera stressed the 2 countries had historically overlapping claims to 25,000 square kilometers in the area. Earlier, Argentina accused the country of violating a 1984 peace treaty that ended the Beagle conflict between the 2 countries. Meanwhile, Santiago asserted that it said at the time Buenos Aires' claim was unenforceable. In the United States, at least 58 people have died as the remnants of Storm Ida ravaged the country's northeastern states. Officials have drawn up lists of the missing and are conducting door-to-door searches of possible victims. The harsh floods ended up submerging cars, swamping subways and basements while trapping scores of people in the 5 states. In New York, a record rain of 3 inches in just an hour overwhelmed the urban drainage systems that were never meant to handle such pressure. Ida, the 5th most powerful storm to hit the U.S., has also caused tens of thousands of dollars in damage. The disaster has depicted the world's most developed country's vulnerability to the extreme weather outcomes of climate change. And across the U.S. West, the summer helicopters buzz low and herd thousands of wild horses into gated areas. The rounds are made necessary by the devastating effects of wildfire and drought. More in this report.
Climate change is endangering the iconic wild horses, livestock and other wildlife. The dire situation in U.S. western lands has led to an unprecedented dialogue between horse rights activists, the cattle industry, and the Bureau of Land Management. Horse defenders have long hated the helicopter-led roundups, called gathers, by the Bureau of Land Management. Wild horses are herded into corrals and then brought to long-term grazing facilities, mostly in the Midwest. A smaller number are also put up for adoption. But faced with dwindling water and plant resources, some rights activists have accepted the roundups as necessary evil when faced with climate change.
The greatest threat to our wild horses and burros and our public lands right now isn't the BLM. It's not cattle ranching interests, it's not mining interests, it's not animal advocates, it's climate change. And that new reality is fast sort of settling in.
The activists are advocating a mix of roundups and fertility control measures to sustain the population of wild horses. The population of wild horses has grown from an estimated 30,000 in 2013 to nearly 80,000. The Coalition of Animal Rights, the Path Forward group, favor using contraception aggressively so that the population achieves a sustainable level. They hope as contraceptive measures ramp up and the number of wild horses gradually stabilizes, the roundups are eased out. According to land management authorities, horses' populations are so large that vaccines alone cannot bring the size down.
The challenge in the short term is that's not going to reduce populations. It allows us to work in places where there are stable populations at sustainable levels, and then we can use the fertility control to be able to support that herd at a sustainable level and avoid the need for more gathers.
However, the Path Forward's approach has been vehemently attacked by some activists. The American Wild Horse Campaign opposes roundups except in emergency situations and believes that horses should receive fertility control vaccinations in their natural habitat. The group's director dismisses the notion that horses should bear the burden of the West's hard time.
In India, forest officials have seized 55 parakeets and arrested 2 persons on charge of smuggling in the eastern Siliguri city. The accused are to be produced in the court while the birds will be released in the Bengal safari park. The authorities caught the smugglers taking the encaged parrots on the bike to the eastern Bihar state. The recovered birds included the Alexandrian and the red-breasted parakeets. The parakeets are also known as talking birds and are protected under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. In London, BANKSY'S famous artworks Love Is in the Bin has returned to the auction room to be sold in October this year. More in this report.
Banksy is a pseudonymous England-based street artist whose real name and identity remain unconfirmed and the subject of speculation. Active since the 1990s, his satirical street art and subversive epigrams combine dark humor with graffiti executed in a distinctive stenciling technique. His latest artwork is up for auction. According to Sotheby's European chairman Oliver Barker, the value of the iconic piece has increased since it became famous in 2018. Barker also said that Banksy's artwork market commercially has also grown exponentially. Barker said work will be displayed briefly in London at Sotheby's New Bond Street galleries and Barker as people are keen to see it on display. Earlier in 2018, Banksy's work, titled Girl with Balloon, had final bid of $1.38 million despite alteration and the artwork. The artwork Love Is in the Bin will travel to Hong Kong, Taipei and New York before the London sale on 14th of October.
It's time to have a look at the weather condition around the world. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. And that's it.